Well, welcome once more to the World Storytelling Cafe. And it's been a brilliant week. We've had storytellers from Colombia. We've had a storyteller from Argentina. We've had a storyteller from Wales. We've had 3 fantastic live sessions. And we've got more coming up next week. Tonight, for instance, Juliana is back from Colombia. Tuesday, Rika is back from Finland. And we have fantastic storytellers all week. But right now, I'm going to do a few stories. I'm just going to tell. I say do. You wouldn't think I was a writer using language like that. I'm going to tell a few stories. And the first one I'm going to tell, I made up myself. I was on my way to an event on an eclipse of the sun. I was out near Lowestoft on the very east coast of East Anglia in England. And it was the eclipse, and it was an event, and they wanted an eclipse story, and I didn't have one. So I made it up on the way. And it was from the very beginning of time. And the celestial spinners had woven fantastic black thread. And the cosmic weavers had woven that black thread into the cloak of night. So at the daytime the cloak was pulled aside, and at night the cloak was pulled across the sky. And there was day, and there was night, and there was light, and there was shade. A bit like now as the clouds go across the sky. But and all the animals had been given their fur and their feathers, and they were incredibly happy. The lion just loved its mane. And the elephant loved its trunk. And the parrot loved its bright feathers. And all the birds were happy except for the raven. Now the raven was the brightest of them all. It had beautiful colours. Fantastic colours. It even outshone the peacock, who used to walk past and look at its tail in its reflection every time it passed a river or a pond. But because the raven was so bright, it was always the centre of attention. But to tell you the truth, the raven was incredibly shy. You know, like some people, they don't want everyone looking at them, even if they're being admired. And it was just like that with the raven. So one night, it flew up into the mountains and took the cloak of night and wrapped it round itself. Well, the raven had the cloak of night, and there was no light, and there was no day, and the sun shone all the time, and the world got hotter and hotter and hotter. And all the animals and all the birds, apart from the raven that is, who was still at the top of the mountain with the cloak of night wrapped round, gathered together. And it was decided that someone should fly up to the cosmic weavers and ask them to weave a new cloak of night. And the sparrow tried, but it only flew a little way. And the skylark flied, but went higher. But then the swallow said, I will try. And it flew higher and higher and higher and higher, until it reached the cosmic weavers. And it said, cosmic weavers, could you, it's just getting hotter and hotter down there. Could you weave us a new cloak of night? And they said, oh, we'd love to, but we've used up all the black thread on the last one. Could you go to the celestial spinners and ask them for some black thread? And of course, if we had the black thread, we'd willingly weave you a new cloak of night. We flew off to the celestial spinners. He said, I'm terribly sorry to disturb you, but if I could just cut into your... They were just weaving silver cloth, silver thread and golden thread. And, they was weaving the silver thread for the cosmic weavers who were weaving the stars, but unfortunately the stars were being put on a light background and nobody could see them. He said, excuse me, but do you mind spinning some black thread so the cosmic weavers can weave a new cloak of night? And the celestial spinners said, we'd love to, but there's a bit of a problem. We need darkness to spin the new thread, and there's been no darkness, and there's nothing. If you could create some darkness, then we'd willingly spin you some new black thread, which you could take to the cosmic weavers, and there could be a new cloak of night. Well, the swallow flew back down, called the council and said, and they said, well, what? If someone could roll the moon across the sun, maybe that will create enough darkness for the celestial spinners to weave some new black thread. Well, the eagle said, I'll fly up there. I don't mind pushing the moon, but there's a problem. I've got that hook on the end of my beak, and I'm afraid of bursting the moon. I need someone to stand on my back to help me push. And the lion said, I will. And the eagle said, it's very kind of you, but not to put too fine a point on it. You're quite greedy, and you're not too fussy about what you eat, and we'd be about a foot off the ground on the way back, and you'd jump off and open your big mouth and swallow me. I'm not saying this is what you do, but I just don't want to risk it. And the elephant said, I don't mind, I'm big and I'm strong. He said, well, no offence, elephant, but you're just a tad heavy for my back. And suddenly there was a little voice, I'll do it. And there was the mouse. And everyone laughed, but the eagle said, no. The mouse would be just the job. Get on my head. And they flew, and they flew, and they flew. And the eagle said, put your hands out. And the little mouse put his hands out, and pushed at the moon, and pushed, but it wouldn't move. So the eagle just said, we'll rush it. We'll rush the moon. And it flew as fast. Just put your hands out. Grip as tight as you can so you don't fall off. It's a long way down. But just and when you're done, boom, boom, and they flew at the moon, and they flew at the moon, and they flew at the moon, and gradually, like a car stuck in the mud, it began to roll forward, and it rolled, and it rolled, and it rolled in front of the sun. And it kept rolling and rolled, but for a few seconds there was enough darkness for the celestial weavers, the celestial spinners, to spin enough thread for the cosmic weavers to weave a new cloak of night. And once more there was day and there was night. But just so, the celestial spinners never run out of black thread again. And the cosmic weavers always have some to weave with, every so often. the mouse gets on the top of the eagle's head. Now, whether they do that because there's always a big feast when they come back, I don't know. But they fly up, they fly high in the sky, and they fly up to the moon, and they push it across the sun. Oh, actually, I made that up with my youngest child, Miles. We made it up in the car on the way up to the event. And there's nothing like having children with you when you're making up stories. Children love stories. And this is another one I made up for a child, this time Fiona. Years ago. And I actually took one of Duncan's stories as the base for it, but it's unrecognisable. And there was a princess, and she was one of those people who wanted, if she saw something, she wanted it. And her dad, the king, her father, was one of those fathers who would give his daughter anything she wanted. She was nice enough, she was friendly, she was merry, she was sociable. It wasn't like she walked around with her nose in the air, but she just wanted everything she saw. There's people like that. Now, if she was walking down the street, if we were allowed to walk down the street, people would look into a shoe shop and want all the shoes. Or they'd look in a furniture shop and they'd want all the furniture. She was a bit like that. She wanted all the toys. She saw an animal she'd want it. She had enough pets to start a zoo with. And one day there was a circus in town. Daddy, 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 take me to the circus, take her. And of course the old king, he couldn't refuse her anything. He took her to the circus. And there in the ring, after the clowns and the jugglers, the most beautiful golden horse. It wasn't a smooth gold, it was a kind of dapple. You can imagine a dapple grey, but with gold as a base, that's what it was like. Oh, it was gorgeous and had this beautiful golden mane and golden tail. And it was so well groomed, it shone. And it was high stepping round the ring. He said, Daddy, 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 buy me that horse. And after the show was finished and the audience had gone, the king asked the horseman how much he wanted. He said, I can't sell you this horse. It took years to train, but in the end, the king offered him so much gold that the horse's owner couldn't refuse. And besides, it was going to the royal palace, it would be very well looked after. That's his favourite horse, but never have a good life. He said, there's just one thing, it's a circus horse. So, to stop it, you don't give it a nudge with your heels. To start it, you don't give it a nudge with your heels. And to stop it, you don't pull at the rein. It obeys words. And nothing simple like gee up. But if you want it to start, you let it go. You go bless you. And if you want it to stop, you just go amen. I think it was a vicar that had it before me. Well, the king listened, but the princess didn't. And as soon as they got the horse home, she saddled it up and put on a beautiful bridle, beautiful, gorgeous reins. Fantastic saddle. Beautiful blanket underneath, so it didn't rub too much on And the king said, remember, whatever you do, don't forget. To start it, you go, bless you. And to stop it, you go, amen. Well, she sort of half listened. She just wanted to see what the horse could do. What was that? That said, bless you. Bless you, said the princess. Oh, and the horse took off, and it was across the fields, and it was leaping hedges, and the princess was a great horsewoman. She held on, and it was leaping walls, and it was running across pastures, and it was running across heathlands, and it ran, and it galloped, and it cantered, and it galloped, and it cantered, and it galloped, and occasionally it just trotted, but mostly it galloped, and it was galloping through the heathland. It came nearer and nearer, and she realised it was galloping straight towards a cliff. And she said, what was it to stop? What was it to stop? And she, and they were nearly on the cliff edge, and she remembered. Amen, she said. The horse screeched to a halt, and she was so relieved. There they were, looking over the hedge, looking over the edge of the cliff. A long way down, and she was so relieved. She leant forward, patted her horse on the neck a few times, and went, bless you. Now you'd think, as the horse disappeared and the rider disappeared over the edge of the cliff, that would be the end of the story. But no. Just below the top of the cliff was a bush sticking out, and the horse's bridle got caught in the bush. The horse was kind of upside down with its bridle stuck in the bush and kicking with its legs in the air just below the top of the cliff, and the princess was hanging by one stirrup down, and there below her was bramble bushes and stinging nettles, and gradually, and the strap of the stirrup gave way, and she fell. But she landed in the middle of that bramble patch with its stinging nettles, and she was stung, and she was covered in scratches and thorns, and all her clothes were torn, but she was so relieved to be alive. She ran back. She got back to the palace, and although she was cleaned up, although her bruises and her cuts were washed and bandaged, she was sad, because her beautiful horse, she'd last seen it on its back in a bush, with its bridle and its reins twisted around a branch. And the horse is so heavy, the bramble, when that gave way, the bramble bush would never save it. But as it happened, a horse-drawn group of 3 gypsy caravans came by. And someone glimpsed the horse. Well, they could hear it. It was making a little noise. And one took a rope around its neck, and they tied the rope to a tree so it wouldn't give way. And he went down and he tied that rope round the horse, and then all the men got out and they pulled and they pulled. Then they took a couple of horses, they unhitched a couple of horses from the wagons, and they pulled and they pulled and they pulled, and they got that beautiful golden horse out and saved it. And they carried on towards the town and the palace of the king. And the story was going around the town how the princess had had a lucky escape when she fell from the cliff, but how she didn't smile at all because she was afraid a horse had been killed and she would never see it again. So the wagons went towards the village, they went towards the palace. They had the golden horse tied behind the last wagon. And they were let in, and they asked to see the princess. They said, "We believe this is yours." Oh, and the princess was overjoyed. And from that day on, she valued her life so much, and the life of a horse. She only asked for things she needed. And as for the great band of gypsies, well, they were allowed to camp on the royal grounds any time they wanted. And of course, they were well rewarded with gold and silver. But the greatest reward was the smile on the princess's face. Well, I think I can do one more story. It's a story that was collected from John Roberts, a Welsh gypsy, and which I might or might not be related to. My great grandfather was a Roberts, and my uncle always said he was a Welsh gypsy, but as far as I can make out, they were a couple of generations from Cobham. But they might be, because at Cobham there was a wheel maker and there was a lot of people settled there. And, so they probably need a lot more research. But I like to think it would be great. It's a vanity. But I would like to think in some small way I was connected to John Roberts, who collected a great many stories. And he told this one to a Suffolk vicar, groom, who wrote a great book in gypsy tents, who travelled this country at the end of the 19th century. Now, John Roberts was a storyteller, a fiddler and a harp player. In fact, he played harp for Queen Victoria, but this is one of his stories. It's called The Golden Snuff Box. And it's a Jack story. And Jack lived with his mum and dad in the middle of the forest. His dad was a forester. And all there were trees, for as far as the eye could see. And Jack was a young man, he'd seen pictures of the outside world. And he'd seen some beautiful women in these pictures, I tell you. And he wanted to go and find them. And he wanted to see what were the great wonders of the world. And he said, you know, nature's great, but Mum, his dad was out to work at the time, and he said, Mum, look, I just don't want to finish my life and all I saw were trees. I think I'm going to seek my fortune. She said, well, you'll be a bit hungry. Will you take a small cake and I'll bless you? Or a huge cake and I'll curse you? He said, well, I'd like to go with your blessing, Mum, but I might get hungry on the journey, so I'll take the large cake. And off he went, and she stood on the roof and she cursed him all the way down the road. And he soon bumped into his dad, and his dad said, oh, where are you going? He said, I'm fed up with the forest, Dad. There's got to be more to life than this. I know now many of us are trying to get back to the forest, but he said, there's got to be more to life than this. I'm off to seek my fortune. He said, well, Dad said, well, good luck to you. You seem to have upset your mum, though. And he gets a little bit down the road, and his dad called him back, said, Dad, said, boy, Jack, come here. I've got a little something for you. And he gave Jack a golden snuff box. And he said, look, if ever, don't open it unless you're really near death. And Jack took that golden snuff box and he put it in his pocket, and he carried on till he came to a huge house, a very rich house, a mansion. In fact, it was pretty near a castle. And he was getting a bit hungry, and he'd eaten the cake by this time, and he was taken in by the maid, and he was warming himself by the fire, and the rich man's daughter came in. Said, Jack. Oh, I mean, he was a good-looking boy, and she quite fancied him. And, well, he went, and she had a little talk to him, and then she went to her dad. She said, Dad, there's the prettiest boy in the kitchen you've ever seen. Come and see him. Bring him to me, said Dad, realising his daughter was smitten. And he wanted to see what sort of lad he was, so he said, what can you do? What can you turn your hand to, Jack? And Jack, being a silly boy, said, I can do absolutely anything. Well, by that he meant paint the fence or, mend a roof or something like that. But so the rich man, he said, look, come. He said, Jack, he said, I'll tell you what. You can have my daughter. I'll give you 3 tasks, and I'll give you the first is I want to wake up tomorrow morning and I want a lake in front of my house, and I want a fleet of ships on there, and I want the man of war at 8 o'clock in the morning precisely to fire a 21-gun salute. And I want a cannonball to come through my daughter's window and take off one leg of her bed. And if not, I'm afraid you're going to have to lose your life. Well, Jack, he was pretty worried, but, he wasn't worried enough to lose any sleep. So he went home, and he woke up about 7:30. He's thinking, I've only got a few minutes left. I've got half an hour. If I can't how am I going to get a lake in half an hour? Whoa. And then he remembered the snuff box, and he opened the snuff box, and 3 little red men jumped out. And they asked him his troubles, and he told them. He said, no trouble at all. I tell you what, at 8 o'clock in the morning, there was a lake outside that rich man's house. There was a fleet on it, and there was a man of war with a 21-gun salute at 8 o'clock precisely, and a cannonball came through the rich man's daughter's window and knocked one leg off her bed. Well, you're clever enough, said the rich man. He said, so tomorrow at 8 o'clock, I'd like you see that forest out there that's sort of blocking my view. I want all the trees cleared for as far as the eye can see. I'm not sure I particularly like that task, but that's how it was. And that's the way it was. And you can be sure the next morning as far as the eye could see, there wasn't a tree in sight. He said, tomorrow. He said, for your 3rd task, I want to look out where you've cleared those trees, and I want a palace on 5 golden pillars. Well, you can be sure the next morning when he woke up, 8 o'clock in the morning, they looked out, and there was the palace on 5 golden pillars. Oh, Jack went to live in that, and he went with the rich man's daughter, and of course they were married. And the rich man was really impressed, and he invited all his friends round and to show off the palace. And before he showed them, they all went off hunting, and Jack went with them, and he was dressed up in his best clothes, and he left his clothes there with his valet to hang up. And the valet was hanging up his day clothes, and he felt a little bulge in the waistcoat pocket. And what was it but the golden snuff box? And he opened it, and the three little red men jumped up and they asked him his business. He said, well, if you could do me a favour and move this palace to the other side of the world, I'd be truly grateful. Well, when the hunting party got back, the palace was nowhere to be seen. And the rich man thought Jack was playing tricks on him. He said, you've got a year and a day to get that palace back, or else you've lost my daughter. And probably worse. Well, Jack set off on his journey and travelled for a long way and further still, till he came to the palace of the King of the Mice, and there was a little sentry. He let Jack through, and he told the King of the Mice his problem. And the King of the Mice said, you sleep well tonight, and you feast with us, and tomorrow morning I'll call all the mice in the world and ask them if they've seen the palace on the 5 golden pillars. Well, the next morning the mice were called, and do you think they'd seen the palace? Not one of them. Well, Jack bid him farewell, and he was given. And he said, "Well, hold on," said the King of the Mice. Go to my brother, the King of the Frogs. Take this fresh horse, and take this cake to him, so he knows you've come from me. Thank you very much," said Jack. Well, on the way out, he passed a little sentry, and the little sentry said, "Can I come with you?" Well, I don't want to upset the King of the Mice. He's been really good to me. But I might be useful. All right, come on. And he climbed up the horse's leg and he got in one of Jack's waistcoat pockets. And they got to the King of the Frogs. And it was a frog sentry. And he let him in. And he gave the cake to the King of the Frogs, and the frogs said, I'll call all the frogs in tomorrow morning. And all the frogs were called the next morning. And do you think they knew they'd seen the palace? Of course they hadn't. And on his way out, the little frog sentry said, "Let me come with you, I might be useful." So he leapt up and got into Jack's other pocket. And the King of the Frogs had said, "Look, I don't know, and neither do any of my frogs, but my brother might, the King of the Birds. Here, take a fresh horse and have this cake. Take this to him, you know you come from me." Off he went. He was taken straight to the King of the Birds, no sentries this time. And the King of the Birds called all the birds. Did they know where a palace was? On 5 golden pillars, not one of them. But just then, the eagle came in. It was exhausted. He said, "Oh, you wouldn't believe this. I went so far and I found a palace. It was on 5 golden pillars." The King of the Birds said, "Well, in that case, you're going to take Jack there." "Well, I'll be a bit hungry," said the eagle. So they killed a thief and they cut the best parts of him off for the eagle. And off they went on Jack on the back of the eagle, and they flew back. They got near the palace, and the mouse said, "Look, I can crawl under the door. I'll get your snuff box." And he went in and he got the snuff box. And they got back on the eagle, and they were flying back across the ocean. And all three, the mouse and the eagle, were arguing who would be more important in getting and they were arguing so much, the snuff box fell into the ocean. And the frog said, "Well, I might be a bit useful here. I'll go down and get it." And he went down. He was down there for 3 days, and he came up with nothing. He was down there for 5 days, and he came up with nothing. And he was down there for 7 days, and this time he had the golden snuff box. And he went back to the King of the Birds. And he opened his snuff box and called out the little red men in red, "Would you go and get me golden palace?" "No problem," they said. And they went and they waited till the valet and all his friends were out hunting. And they went in, and They thought it was empty, but there was a gypsy woman, and she'd called round to the servants just to see. She'd wait till everyone was gone. She called in. She went round the back door to beg for some food. And there was just the housemaid and the cook, and you know they were good company. And the three of them were nattering together when along came the little red men, and they said, "Do you want to stay here? Do you want to stay here, or are you coming with the palace?" They said, "We'll come with the palace." I tell you what, that took so long to fly the palace across the ocean by Sunday. They had to be a church service, so the frog dressed up as a vicar, and they try and played the organ. Didn't make a terrible noise, because there was one little red man sitting in the pipes with his legs hanging over the edge, but eventually they got back to the King of the Birds, and the King of the Birds loved the palace, but I tell you what, he loved the gypsy woman more. And he asked about her. He said, "Who are your people?" She said, "Oh, the Lovells, the Prices, and the Smiths, and a few others I can't remember." Well, Jack left. Jack put the snuff box in his pocket, and he set off on the King of the Frog's horse, and he swapped that for the King of the Mouse's horse, and then he swapped that for his own horse, and he rode back, and it was nearly a year, and he got to his father-in-law, and his father-in-law, he thought everyone would run out to greet him, but no, he didn't have the palace with him. So he said, "Okay, give me a day. It's only a year gone, and you said I had a year and a day." And he said, "Little red man," he said, "take me back to the King of the Birds." He went back there, and he said, "The gypsy woman, do you want to come with me, or are you going to stay with the king here?" And she said, "I prefer to stay with the palace and stay with you." So, and he was quite pleased, because he wanted her for a nurse. And they flew back, and there was the great palace. And of course, Jack's wife came running out to him, and she was pleased enough to have the housemaid, the cook, and the gypsy woman for a nurse. But of course, the gypsy woman, she was by herself. She didn't have a king. She didn't have her people. And she got sadder and sadder. So Jack took the little red man and said, "Could you take a great ship, and could you sail it across, and can you pick up this lady's relations, this woman's relations, and bring them all back here?" And I tell you what, they all came back, and they camped in the palace grounds. And Jack and his wife, they had many children, and they played with the children in the camp, and you couldn't tell one from another. And if you go to that place this very day, you'll still see a fire, wagons, and children playing happily. And one day, we'll be able to gather together and play happily again. Because to this weekend, I should have been at Cosmic Puffin on Mersey Island and at Hartford Book Fair and probably Mayday in Ipswich, seeing all my friends and telling loads of stories. But as it happens, I've travelled the world to see you at the World Storytelling Cafe. And if you like the stories, I can't drop in for a bit of food in your kitchen. So if you could drop me the means of buying some in the little hat down there, that would be fantastic. And make sure you listen to the fantastic tellers that are coming up in the cafe this week.